such as no man but Washington ever had before. He had, too, a more difficult task to accomplish than Washington. John Langdon Sibley, diary entry for April 23, 1865, Harvard University Archives. Introduction. The Disposition of Democracy. We have all heard the dreary complaints at one time or another, and now perhaps more than ever. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others, according to Winston Churchill. Democracy is the rule of hooligans, according to Jason Brennan. Democracies are historical accidents that are closing before our eyes, according to Jean-François Revel. Or worse, they slouch toward becoming flabby, prosperous, self-satisfied, inward-looking, weak-willed states, according to Francis Fukuyama. Conventional democratic ideas are fairy tales, according to Christopher H. Aiken and Larry M. Bartels. Democracies have no use for beauty or community, according to Richard Legutsko. Democracies die at the hands of the governments they elect, according to Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. 2 cheers, and only 2 cheers, for democracy, according to E.M. Forster. Perhaps none of this should strike us with any surprising force. We have lived through a century in which democracies have been repeatedly tried and repeatedly failed, or worse, been easily subverted or overthrown. And the most recent failures were cruelest in their impact for having arrived, after 1991, at a moment when democracy seemed to have emerged unchallengeable from a generation-long struggle with its most serious totalitarian rival. Solidarność triumphed in Eastern Europe. The Berlin Wall crumbled and the Soviet overlords disappeared. The goddess of freedom reared her torch on Tiananmen Square. And then, almost as quickly, democracy sagged and, in many places, collapsed. Tiananmen Square was brutally emptied. A former Soviet intelligence operative shrewdly twisted post-Soviet elections into a nationalist authoritarianism. The fastest-growing and most aggressive economy in the world belonged to a repressive dictatorship which had been fathered by one of the most genocidal minds of modern times. According to the annual surveys published by Freedom House, the number of people living in genuinely democratic states has fallen by more than half since 2003. Even in places where the cardboard facade of democracy is maintained, the countervailing forces of state control of media, curbs on political assembly, judicial corruption, and bureaucratic metastasis make a mockery of the word. Yet at the same moment, real democracies too often allow themselves to be judged by the pitiless standards of their rivals. They drown themselves in guilt for any absence of perfection, ignore real imperfections with indignation, and imagine every difficulty to be a crisis. They are as vulnerable to their own self-criticism as they are to external aggression. The biographer of democracy's earliest champion has spoken of democracy as one of the rarest, most delicate and fragile flowers in the jungle of human existence. After all, he reasoned, democracy was the rule of the day for only 200 years in its birthplace, Athens, and disappeared thereafter for 2 millennia. If durability and persistence were the measure of political success, the intervening centuries of monarchy, oligarchy, and despotism would send democracy to the bottom of the most desired list of political theories. The United States of America is the longest still-functioning large-scale democracy in the world. Created as a republic on the model of Republican Rome in the late 18th century, it had a strong democratic torque from the beginning, which only became more pronounced in its first 4 decades of life. Its founding documents, its Declaration of Independence from Great Britain and its Federal Constitution of 1787, articulate many of what have become accepted as fundamental principles of a democracy: the natural equality of all humanity as opposed to traditional or organic hierarchy, a national government of explicitly limited powers, and a separation of even those powers within the national government. But the United States was, and is, by no means a pure democracy. Even in 1787, the sheer size of the American Republic seemed